The terminal was alive with the rhythm of constant movement, rolling suitcases clicking against polished tiles, the murmur of conversations blending with the robotic cadence of overhead announcements. Flight 782 to London now boarding at gate C12, echoed across the wide hall. Families huddled together, business travelers tapped away at laptops, and children tugged at their parents' sleeves with impatience. Through this whirlpool of motion walked Maya Johnson, her stride calm but purposeful. She wore a tailored navy blazer, her polished shoes clicking softly with each step. In her hand was her passport, neatly tucked inside a protective cover along with her boarding pass. To anyone watching, she looked like a composed professional, neither hurried nor flustered, someone accustomed to travel. But inside, she carried the weight of urgency. This was not just a trip, it was an assignment. Her presence was required overseas for a high-level inspection, and timing mattered. She stopped at gate C12. A serpentine line of passengers had already formed, each inching forward as the gate agent scanned boarding passes and flipped through passports with perfunctory efficiency. At the podium stood Mr. Daniels, the gate agent, tall with stiff posture, his jaw set in permanent disapproval. His sharp eyes scanned each traveler as if searching for a reason to deny entry. Every sigh, every tap of impatience, every subtle roll of his shoulders communicated that this was a man who relished power in the smallest ways. Maya joined the line quietly, waiting her turn. She glanced at the passengers around her, an elderly couple whispering about souvenirs they bought, a teenager balancing a tower of fast food trays, a mother holding a toddler who fussed with his blanket. She felt the familiar buzz of human diversity, a scene she'd witnessed countless times in her travels. As the line moved, the tension at the front grew more visible. A young man fumbled with his documents, and Daniels made a show of sighing dramatically before stamping his ticket. A woman with a foreign-sounding last name received a long, suspicious stare before being waved through with a curt flick of the wrist. These small gestures didn't go unnoticed by Maya. She observed, quietly cataloguing his behavior, her calm demeanor concealing sharp awareness. Finally, it was her turn. She stepped forward, standing tall, her voice even as she greeted, "Good morning." Daniels didn't return the courtesy. His eyes dropped immediately to her hand. "Passport!" he barked. Maya placed it on the counter gently, the deep blue cover catching the overhead lights. He picked it up with 2 fingers, almost disdainfully, as though the object itself carried an invisible stain. He flipped it open, squinting at the page. His brow furrowed, not because there was anything wrong, but because he seemed to be searching for something to question. "This doesn't look right," he said finally, his voice deliberately loud, projecting across the small waiting area. Passengers behind Maya tilted their heads, curiosity sparking. A few shuffled closer, eager for drama. Maya's tone remained polite but firm. "That's an official United States passport. It's valid, and so is my boarding pass." Daniels smirked, a gleam of arrogance lighting his eyes. "Looks after me. Maybe it's fake." He held the passport up, angling it toward the fluorescent lights, as though expecting the document to betray its own authenticity. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the line. A man whispered to his wife, "She looks perfectly legitimate." Another passenger pulled out a phone, tilting it slightly as though ready to record. Maya's heartbeat steadied. She knew the importance of composure. "If you're unsure, you can call a supervisor," she suggested, her words calm, measured, but Daniels wasn't interested in protocol. Instead, with exaggerated slowness, he snapped the passport shut and tapped it against the podium. His lips curled into a smirk. "I don't need a supervisor to tell me when something looks wrong." Then, in a shocking movement that stole the air from the room, he tore the corner of the passport. The crisp sound of ripping paper cut through the hum of the terminal like a blade. Before Maya could respond, he produced a lighter from his pocket, a sleek, metallic click, and with practiced ease, he ignited the torn edge. The flame licked hungrily at the paper, curling it black, sending up a faint wisp of acrid smoke. Gasps erupted instantly. A woman clutched her chest. Someone exclaimed, "Oh my God!" A child tugged at his father's sleeve, eyes wide at the sight of fire where no fire should be. Maya stared at the burning passport, her breath catching for only a fraction of a second. She did not lunge. She did not scream. Her training and years of professional discipline held her still. The flame lasted only moments before Daniels smothered it against the counter, leaving a charred corner. The damage irreversible but contained. The silence that followed was deafening, heavy with disbelief. Every eye in the gate area was fixed on the scene. Daniels stood taller, puffed up with self-importance, his hand resting casually on the blackened passport, as if he had just defended the nation from a grand threat. Maya finally drew in a slow, steady breath, her eyes meeting his, calm, unyielding. Her voice, when she spoke, was low but firm enough to carry. "Sir, do you realize what you've just done?" Her words sliced through the tension, and though they were spoken quietly, they resonated louder than the earlier gasps. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, anger simmering among them. A man in the line called out, "That's illegal! You can't just destroy someone's passport." Another voice rose, "She didn't do anything wrong." Daniels ignored them, brushing off the weight of the crowd's disapproval as though it were nothing more than background noise. He folded his arms, his smirk widening. "I'm the authority here. If I decide it looks suspicious, I have every right to act." His words dripped arrogance, each syllable daring anyone to challenge him. Maya's eyes remained locked on his, her expression unreadable. Inside, she felt the pulse of quiet anger, but she buried it deep beneath layers of composure. "Your job," she said evenly, "is to ensure safe and respectful travel, not to humiliate passengers or destroy government property." The crowd erupted again, voices layering over each other, phones lifted high, recording every second. Daniels stood, still convinced he had control. But what he didn't know, what none of them yet realized, was that this single reckless act had just set in motion a chain of consequences far beyond his understanding. Maya looked down briefly at the charred edge of her passport, then back up at him, her calm demeanor almost unnerving in its steadiness. For Daniels, it felt like standing in front of a storm cloud, unaware of the lightning poised to strike. The acrid scent of burnt paper still lingered faintly in the air, carried by the low hum of ventilation above the gate. The crowd, that had once been a scattered line of travelers, was now a cluster pressing forward in disbelief, phones raised like a forest of glowing eyes. The destroyed passport sat on the counter, its charred edge curling inward like a wound that could never be healed. Maya stood motionless, her composure unshaken, though the intensity of her gaze made the gate agent fidget for the first time. "You can't do that!" a woman from the back shouted, her voice trembling with indignation. She stepped closer, pulling her rolling bag behind her. "That's someone's identity. That's a federal document." Daniels waved her off with a flick of his hand, his jaw tightening. "Mind your own business," he snapped, his tone full of false authority. "Passengers are not to interfere with gate procedures. This woman presented a suspicious document and I handled it." "Handled it?" Another man barked from near the front. He wore a grey business suit, his face flushed with anger. "You just committed a crime in front of everyone here." Daniels adjusted his tie, trying to maintain a facade of control. He leaned forward on the podium, directing his voice at Maya, though his eyes darted nervously to the crowd. "Ma'am, you'll need to step aside for questioning. This flight isn't for you." Maya tilted her head slightly, her calmness drawing a sharp contrast against his rising irritation. Her voice was low but commanding, carrying over the restless murmurs. "Sir, I've already explained. My passport was valid. You've destroyed it in front of witnesses, and now you're doubling down." The murmurs swelled. Someone whispered, "She's so calm. I'd be yelling by now." Another muttered, "He's going to lose his job for this." Daniels turned sharply, his patience thinning. He jabbed a finger toward the security post across the concourse. "Security!" he called, his voice loud but shaky at the edges. "We have a situation here. Two airport security officers, both in dark uniforms, appeared moments later, their radios clipped to their shoulders. The crowd parted slightly as they approached, though not without a few pointed comments. One passenger muttered under their breath, "Good, maybe he'll finally get put in his place." The taller officer spoke first, his tone neutral. "What seems to be the issue here?" Daniels jumped in before Maya could open her mouth. He jabbed a thumb in her direction. "This woman tried to board with a fake passport. I acted accordingly. It's a matter of security." Gasps rippled through the bystanders. A woman holding a stroller shook her head violently. "That's not true. I saw her. She handed over a normal passport. He lit it on fire." Another man lifted his phone higher, his voice steady but outraged. "I have it recorded, every second of it. He's lying." The officers glanced at each other, their brows furrowed. The second officer turned toward Maya. "Ma'am, is that correct?" Maya exhaled slowly, her posture poised, her words precise. "Yes, my passport was valid and current. He chose to destroy it publicly, claiming it was suspicious. I suggested calling a supervisor, but he ignored protocol." Daniel sneered, his voice sharpening. "She's making it sound more dramatic than it was." "I had every reason to believe." "You had no reason," interrupted a young man from the line, his phone still recording. His voice rose over Daniel's. "You didn't even scan it. You just burned it." The taller officer raised a hand, signaling for quiet. "Sir," he said firmly to Daniels, "burning a passport is not procedure under any circumstances. Passengers are to be referred to higher authorities if there's doubt. You know that." Daniel's face flushed crimson, but he held his ground. "I've been working here 15 years. I know what I'm doing. Suspicious documents can't be allowed through." Maya's lips curved in the faintest of smiles, though her eyes remained sharp. "And in those 15 years, how many passports have you burned exactly?" The crowd chuckled bitterly, the tension momentarily breaking with the sting of her words. Daniels clenched his fists, his composure slipping further. The second officer leaned closer to the podium, examining the charred remains of the passport. He looked up at Maya, his tone respectful. "Ma'am, do you have any other identification with you?" Before she could answer, Daniels snapped, "Don't humor her! She's clearly lying. She's making a scene to cover up the fact she was caught." That was the final straw for several in the crowd. Voices rose all at once. "You're lying. She didn't do anything." "You should be the one questioned." One woman stepped forward boldly, holding her phone inches from Daniel's face. "Say it again. Say she had a fake passport. Because the whole internet's about to see you burn an innocent woman's documents for no reason." Daniels flinched at the phone, his bravado cracking for the first time. His eyes darted to the officers, searching for backup. But their expressions were no longer neutral. They were tight with disapproval. Maya finally spoke again, her voice quiet, but carrying more weight than all the shouts combined. "Sir, your arrogance has already spoken louder than you realize. Every person here saw what happened. Every camera recorded it. And when the truth comes to light, the consequences will follow." The murmurs hushed. Her words, steady as stone, settled over the crowd like a verdict already given. Daniel straightened his shoulders, trying one last time to reclaim authority. "You all don't understand. I was protecting the flight. But no one was listening anymore. Passengers shook their heads, muttering about lawsuits, about calling the media, about sending the recordings to every platform. The officers stood on either side of Daniels now, their stance less like colleagues and more like watchmen, preparing to intervene. Maya glanced once more at the charred passport lying on the counter. Its cover was warped, its edges brittle, but it was still recognizable, a powerful symbol of what had just occurred. She lifted her gaze back to Daniels, her calmness unnerving him more than any outburst could. "You didn't just destroy my passport," she said softly, her words carrying across the gate. "You destroyed your credibility, your professionalism, and perhaps your career, all in the span of 30 seconds. The crowd erupted in murmurs of agreement. Phones buzzed as recordings were shared, uploaded, sent across digital networks faster than the situation could unfold. Daniels stood frozen, the weight of 100 eyes pressing down on him, the once small podium now feeling like a cage he couldn't escape. And yet, Maya hadn't revealed who she truly was. Not yet. That truth waited like a blade, sharp and hidden, ready to strike at the moment she chose. For now, she let the silence build, the pressure grow, and the crowd turn against the man who thought he owned the air around Gate C-12. The stage was set. The real revelation was still to come. The air around Gate C-12 had thickened, heavy with tension, whispers, and the flickering glow of smartphone cameras. Travelers who had once been eager to board their flight now stood rooted in place, unwilling to miss what had become the spectacle of the day. Children peeked from behind their parents, wide-eyed, while adults murmured angrily among themselves, shaking their heads at the gate agent's behavior. Mr. Daniels shifted his weight from one foot to the other, still standing tall behind the counter, but no longer looking as untouchable as before. His face flushed crimson, his jaw clenched, and his eyes darted from passenger to passenger. He could feel the heat of their judgment pressing in on him, the digital eyes of dozens of cameras capturing every twitch of his expression. Maya Johnson, however, stood perfectly still. Calm, collected, her breathing steady as though she had trained for this very moment. She was not the picture of a woman defeated by humiliation. Instead, she radiated the quiet strength of someone who knew the ending before the story had even begun. The taller security officer cleared his throat. "Mr. Daniels, we need to de-escalate this situation immediately. You've destroyed her document, and there are multiple witnesses saying the passenger complied fully with your instructions." Daniels barked out a laugh, sharp and brittle. "You don't get it. This woman, she's playing all of you. You really think people don't forge passports? I was protecting the flight. I've seen this before." A murmur of disapproval rose from the crowd. Someone shouted, "We all saw what happened! Stop lying!" Another voice cut through, firm and clear. "He's trying to cover himself." "Don't let him." The second officer, younger but no less firm, stepped closer to Maya. "Ma'am, if you could provide any secondary identification, it would help clarify things." His tone was respectful, almost deferential. Maya did not immediately reach for her bag. Instead, she looked at Daniels, her gaze steady, unwavering. "You believe you're the authority here," she said softly, but her words carried. "But authority without accountability is nothing more than arrogance." Her calm defiance sent another ripple through the crowd. Passengers leaned closer, their phones capturing her every word. Daniels rolled his eyes dramatically, scoffing as if to dismiss her entirely. "Oh, please. Spare me the lecture." "You don't intimidate me." And then it happened. Maya slowly bent down, unzipping the sleek carry-on bag at her feet. Her movements were deliberate, unhurried, like an actor drawing out the climax of a performance. She reached inside, retrieving a black leather folio, plain, professional, unassuming. Holding it with both hands, she flipped it open. The gold of the badge caught the overhead lights, gleaming for all to see. The seal of the Federal Aviation Administration stood unmistakable, authoritative, and unyielding. Next to it, her identification card, stamped, signed, and laminated, bore her photograph and title in bold lettering, Chief Inspector Maya Johnson, Federal Aviation Administration. The silence that followed was electric. The crowd collectively inhaled, the revelation striking harder than any outburst could have. Maya straightened her shoulders, her voice crisp, clear, and commanding. "I am Chief Inspector Johnson of the FAA. I am responsible for oversight of aviation security and compliance. And you—" She fixed Daniels with a look that cut deeper than any blade. "Just destroyed federal property, unlawfully interfered with a passenger, and compromised the trust this airport is meant to uphold." The eruption was immediate. Gasps, shouts, and even applause echoed through the gate. Phones tilted upward, trying to capture both Maya's badge and Daniel's paling face in the same frame. One passenger exclaimed, "Oh my God, she's FAA." Another added, "This is going viral right now." Daniel stumbled backward half a step, his bravado crumbling in real time. I didn't know," he stammered. I didn't realize. Maya didn't let him finish. That's the problem, she said sharply. You didn't care to realize. You didn't follow procedure. You acted on impulse, on arrogance, and in doing so you broke the law. The taller officer straightened, his expression now openly disapproving. Mr. Daniels, you're going to have to come with us. No, wait. Daniels lifted his hands, palms outward, as though he could push back the tide of accountability. This is all a misunderstanding. I thought I was doing my job. You thought wrong, Maya interrupted, her voice precise, cutting through his excuses like glass. She turned slightly, her eyes sweeping across the crowd. In this role, respect for every passenger is non-negotiable. Whether a traveler is in a business suit or jeans, whether their name sounds familiar or foreign, it is irrelevant. Every passenger deserves dignity. The crowd broke into scattered applause. Some clapped in anger, others in admiration. But the sound rose, undeniable, echoing through the gate. Daniel's face crumpled under the noise, his eyes darting from phone to phone, the reality of his downfall playing out in real time. He tried once more, his voice cracking under the weight of desperation. Chief Inspector, if I had known who you were. Maya's eyes flashed, her calm composure tightening into steel. If you had known who I was, you would have treated me differently. That is the very definition of corruption. A true professional treats every passenger with respect, regardless of their title or position. You failed in your duty, and now you'll be held accountable. The officers stepped forward, flanking Daniels, their hands resting on his arms. He didn't resist, but his shoulders sagged as though the life had drained from him. The taller officer spoke into his radio quietly, calling for additional personnel. Passengers filmed from every angle, their faces lit by the glow of their screens, eager to capture the downfall of the once arrogant gate agent. The woman with the stroller whispered to her toddler, "See? That's what happens when you're cruel to people." The businessman in the grey suit nodded approvingly, muttering, "Justice served." Maya closed the leather folio with a quiet snap and slipped it back into her bag. She exhaled slowly, allowing her shoulders to relax, though her eyes remained alert. She had revealed who she was, but the work was not finished. A report would be filed, procedures would be reviewed, and the man who had tried to humiliate her would face the consequences, not because she was chief inspector, but because justice demanded it. Still, in that moment, the crowd didn't see a bureaucratic process. They saw vindication. They saw the arrogant gate agent exposed, and the woman he had tried to demean stand taller than ever, a figure of authority, dignity, and strength. As Daniels was escorted away, his protests growing weaker, passengers began to cheer. Some raised their phones in salute, others simply clapped, their voices echoing across the terminal. The announcement system chimed, but its metallic voice was drowned out by the sound of people celebrating accountability in real time. Maya adjusted her blazer, took a final glance at the podium, where the charred passport still lay, and turned back to the gate area. The passengers' faces reflected admiration and relief, as if they, too, had been vindicated. In their eyes, this was more than a confrontation. It was a reminder: no one, no matter how small their role or how big their ego, is above respect and accountability. And for Daniels, that truth had arrived far too late. The echo of applause still lingered in the terminal when the officers stepped in closer, their stance leaving no room for negotiation. The taller officer kept his hand firm on Daniel's elbow, while the younger one spoke into his radio, requesting immediate backup and notifying the shift supervisor. The gate, once a symbol of routine air travel, now felt like a courtroom, the passengers serving as jury, the cameras as judge, and the verdict already written on Daniels's ashen face. He tried to wriggle free, puffing up his chest one last time. "Wait, you can't just haul me away like this." His voice cracked, half command, half plea. "I was doing my job. I was protecting the flight." The taller officer turned his head slightly, his tone controlled but firm. "Sir, burning a passport isn't protecting anything. It's a federal offense. You're lucky we aren't already cuffing you in front of everyone here." The crowd murmured its approval. A teenager near the back called out, "Yeah, cuff him!" And laughter rippled through the group, a nervous, almost cathartic release of tension. Maya stood silently, her hands folded in front of her, her posture radiating authority without theatrics. Her eyes stayed locked on Daniel's, watching as every ounce of his arrogance drained away under the pressure of his own mistakes. She didn't have to gloat, didn't have to raise her voice. The silence of her judgment was louder than anything she could have said. Finally, she stepped forward. Her heels clicked sharply against the tile floor, a sound that cut through the murmurs. Standing just a few feet from him now, she spoke, her voice low and deliberate, designed not only for him, but for every person holding up a phone, recording every word. "You tried to justify humiliation under the mask of authority," she said. "You assumed no one would question you, that your word would stand above all else. But authority without integrity is abuse, and abuse will always be exposed." Daniels's lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came out. His throat worked, swallowing hard, his eyes darting from Maya to the passengers who stared at him with open contempt. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. The man who once lorded over the gate with smug control now looked like a criminal awaiting sentencing. Maya turned her gaze toward the officers. "Please ensure he's properly documented and that his actions are reported to federal authorities. Destroying a passport is not only unlawful, it undermines the very security he claims to uphold." The younger officer nodded firmly. "Understood, ma'am. We'll take care of it." As Daniels was led a step away from the podium, his protests reignited, shrill and desperate. "This is insane. I didn't mean to. I thought I was stopping something dangerous." His eyes swept over the crowd, searching for sympathy. But all he saw were shaking heads, folded arms, and phones still recording. Maya finally allowed herself to address him directly, her tone sharp and professional, the kind of tone that carved itself into memory. "You didn't think, Mr. Daniels, that was the problem. Instead of following procedure, you followed your ego. You treated me as less than human because of your assumptions. And you did it in front of witnesses who will never forget it." Her words stung more than the officer's grip. His shoulders slumped and his voice shrank. I didn't know," he muttered, barely audible. Maya's eyes narrowed. "If you had known my title, you would have acted differently. That tells me everything about your character. True professionalism means every traveler receives respect, regardless of who they are or what position they hold. Today, you proved you never understood that." The applause came again, spontaneous and fierce, as if the passengers themselves needed to punctuate her words with their approval. Daniels winced, the sound pressing down on him like a weight. The airline manager, a middle-aged man with a polished suit and a sheen of sweat on his forehead, rushed into the scene, clearly summoned by frantic radio calls. His eyes flicked from the burned passport on the counter to Maya's calm stance, and finally to Daniel's, restrained by officers. His face blanched. "Chief Inspector Johnson," he said quickly, bowing his head slightly. "On behalf of the airline, I want to extend our deepest apologies for what has just occurred. This behavior is inexcusable, and we will cooperate fully with your office in investigating this matter." Maya turned her head toward him, her gaze still steady, her voice controlled. "Your employee acted recklessly, with no regard for protocol or human dignity. A system that allows such behavior unchecked is a system in need of urgent reform." The manager swallowed hard, nodding rapidly. "Yes, absolutely. We will make this right immediately. We'll arrange expedited documentation for you, alternate boarding, accommodations, anything you require." The passengers muttered among themselves. Some clapped at Maya's firmness. Others shook their heads, still baffled that such a scene had even unfolded in a place meant to represent order and safety. Daniels, meanwhile, sagged between the officers, his defiance gone. He looked less like a gate agent now, and more like a man caught in the wreckage of his own pride. His lips moved silently as though searching for words, but nothing came. His career, 15 years of posturing and power games, was crumbling under the unflinching gaze of the very people he once lorded over. Maya took a step back, giving the officers room to lead him away. As they moved him toward the concourse exit, the crowd parted like a tide, cold stares and muttered insults following him with every step. A woman whispered, "Good riddance," while another said, "Let this be a lesson." When Daniels was finally out of sight, the atmosphere shifted. The tension that had gripped the passengers dissolved into a strange blend of relief and admiration. Conversations bubbled up, phones buzzed with notifications as videos uploaded to social platforms, and the words FAA Inspector and Justice trended in real time. Maya turned back toward the podium. The charred passport still sat there, a symbol of the humiliation she had endured and the arrogance that had caused it. She picked it up gently, holding it in her hand for a moment. The passengers watched as she examined it, her expression unreadable, before she set it back down with deliberate care. Her voice, calm and steady, carried once more. "This is about more than one man's arrogance. It's about every passenger who has ever been treated as less than, every traveler who has felt stripped of dignity at a checkpoint or a gate. Today, we set a precedent. Respect is not optional." The applause this time was louder, fuller, as though the passengers wanted to honor her not just for who she was, but for what she represented. The airline manager spoke again, his voice almost trembling. "Inspector Johnson, we'll have a replacement passport arranged within hours and a secure seat on the next available flight. Please accept our apologies." Maya inclined her head slightly, accepting the words but not letting them absolve the greater issue. "Apologies are a start. Accountability is what matters." The crowd quieted, listening. Her words had become more than a reprimand for one man. They had become a message to everyone within earshot. The officers returned, their radios crackling faintly. "He's been escorted to holding for questioning," the taller one reported. Maya nodded once. "Good. Ensure the footage gathered here is preserved. The public deserves transparency." And with that, she stepped back, her figure calm, dignified, and resolute. Passengers continued to whisper and film, their admiration palpable. But Maya was already moving on, her focus on the larger mission, her presence leaving behind a reminder that integrity, once demanded, could never be silenced. Justice had begun its course, and nothing, not arrogance, not lies, not even fire, could stop it. The gate area, once tense and chaotic, was now buzzing with an almost celebratory energy. Travelers, who just minutes earlier were whispering nervously and shifting uneasily, had relaxed into a strange unity. They were no longer strangers in line for a flight. They were witnesses to justice. Phones were still out, screens glowing, videos uploading faster than anyone could keep track. Somewhere already, hashtags were forming and trending, though no one yet knew just how far the story would reach. Maya stood at the center of it all, calm and poised, the quiet gravity around which the scene orbited. She looked neither triumphant nor bitter, only steady, the embodiment of composure. The charred remains of her passport still rested on the counter, the blackened corner curled in like a scar, but she didn't glance at it again. Instead, she addressed the crowd, her voice rising above the chatter. "No one," she began, "should ever be treated as though their dignity is optional." The terminal grew quiet almost instantly. Even the restless children stilled, their parents urging them softly to listen. Maya continued, her tone carrying a balance of warmth and steel. "Travel is not just about moving from one place to another. It's about trust. Trust in the systems designed to protect us. Trust in the people whose job it is to serve with fairness. And trust that our identities and rights will be respected. What you witnessed today was not a simple mistake. It was a violation of that trust." Heads nodded across the gathering. Someone near the back whispered, "She's right." And another voice murmured, "Finally." Someone saying it out loud. The airline manager, still standing nervously to the side, shifted his weight as though each of Maya's words was directed squarely at him. He opened his mouth to speak, but she raised her hand slightly, and he fell silent, letting her finish. Accountability, Maya said, is the cornerstone of safety. Without it, the system fails. Without it, arrogance and prejudice take root. What happened here was not only wrong, it was dangerous. Because when one person abuses authority, it undermines confidence in everyone who wears a uniform, stamps a ticket or checks a passport. The applause started slowly. A single pair of hands clapping near the front, then another, then more, until the gate area echoed with thunderous approval. Maya waited, letting the sound crest and then fade before speaking again. "I appreciate your support," she said, her tone softening. "But let's not forget, this isn't about me. This is about every traveler who deserves to walk into an airport and know they will be treated with respect. It's about the families, the students, the workers, the dreamers, all of you, who deserve better than what you just witnessed." From the corner, the young man who had been recording the whole ordeal spoke up, his voice shaking slightly with the thrill of what he'd seen. "People need to hear this. I've already uploaded the video. It's spreading." Maya nodded slightly, unsurprised. "Then let it spread. Let it serve as a reminder that respect isn't negotiable, and let it hold accountable those who forget that simple truth." The airline manager finally found his voice. He stepped forward, wringing his hands. "Inspector Johnson, we will do everything necessary to repair this situation. Our staff failed you, and in doing so, failed everyone here. Please, allow me to personally oversee your accommodations. We'll have an emergency replacement passport expedited through State Department channels. You'll be on the next available flight." Maya regarded him evenly, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she gave a slight nod. "I'll accept your assistance, but understand, this isn't about convenience. This isn't about me catching my next flight. This is about ensuring that no passenger, regardless of who they are, has to face this again. If your airline truly wishes to make amends, start by reviewing your training and your standards of accountability. Make sure your employees understand that respect is not optional, it is required." The manager bowed his head. "Yes, ma'am, understood. I'll see to it personally." The passengers murmured in approval again. Some clapped softly. Others exchanged looks that said more than words could, that they felt in that moment safer, more seen, more respected because of Maya's presence. She glanced toward the boarding bridge, where flight attendants were waiting, their eyes wide with a mix of admiration and unease. "Is the flight still boarding?" she asked. One of them, a young woman with neatly tied hair, nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am. We were holding until the situation was resolved." Maya gave her a reassuring smile. "Then let's continue. These passengers have waited long enough." The attendants looked relieved, and the line began to form again, though this time with an air of quiet pride rather than weary impatience. Passengers whispered to each other as they approached the gate, some sneaking glances back at Maya, others offering hushed words of gratitude. As the last of the line disappeared into the jet bridge, Maya gathered her belongings, her charred passport carefully slipped into an envelope by one of the officers for evidence. The crowd that remained, the ones waiting for other flights, or simply too captivated to move on, watched her as if she were more than just an official. In their eyes, she was a symbol. She paused one last time, turning back to them. "Remember," she said, her voice carrying through the terminal, "justice is not a privilege reserved for a few. It's a right that belongs to everyone. And sometimes it takes one moment, one voice, to remind the world of that truth." With that, she walked toward the boarding gate, her heels striking the floor with quiet authority. The passengers she passed stepped aside instinctively, some nodding respectfully, others offering small, grateful smiles. By the time she reached the jet bridge, the first videos of the incident were already circulating online. Titles blazed across screens. "Gate agent burns passenger's passport. Turns out she's FAA Chief Inspector." Clips spread across platforms, gathering thousands of views by the minute. Hashtags multiplying. "Justice at the gate." Respect all travelers, FAA Inspector. Inside the plane, whispers followed her as she took her seat by the window. Some passengers recognized her instantly, offering discreet nods of acknowledgement. Others, who hadn't witnessed the full ordeal, leaned across aisles, asking what had happened, their neighbors eagerly filling them in. Maya fastened her seatbelt and leaned back, exhaling slowly. The glint of her badge, now tucked safely away in her bag, seemed to linger in the minds of everyone who had seen it. Outside the window, the tarmac lights flickered and the plane's engines rumbled to life. She knew the work was far from over. Reports would need to be filed, inquiries conducted, training overhauled. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. Today, in one airport gate, justice had prevailed, not because she was an inspector, but because truth had been revealed in front of the very people it was meant to protect. As the plane lifted into the night sky, leaving the airport and the scandal below, Maya allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The fight for accountability would continue tomorrow. But tonight, she carried with her the knowledge that dignity had been defended and that, for at least one moment, justice had been undeniable.